Welcome back here at Legacy Conversations. We're carrying on with Sergeant Major S.W. Fourie. And I think I said it in one of the previous episodes, he's probably the only nice Sergeant Major which I'm aware of. And yeah, you can hear him grinning there in the background. But if you've been in the South African Army or military, you will understand what a Sergeant Major is. Something to be avoided. But this specific one is sitting in front of us is also an explosives expert. SW, perhaps you can explain to us your background in explosives, because I was thinking in many of the episodes, as well as those to come, we're going to talk a lot about sabotage type of raids. The explosives were used in many different forms, and I'm sure there's a lot of people who want to know more about the use of explosives. Now, we don't want to create a terrorist here. We don't want to give out any secrets as such, but we're talking about something which happened 4 decades ago, and I'm sure that most of the techniques are already well known. So it's over to you. I know that you were actually an instructor in explosives, and I know you did it only for money, so you said, but I believe you had an interest in it as well.
Yes, okay. Great. Like I said in one of the episodes, is that everybody do exactly the basic and your qualifying courses before you're operational. And then during that phase, which is about a year, you can decide yourself which direction you want to go. That's a free choice. So I decided in explosives for various reasons. I only realized afterwards the benefit of that is that you always selected, if they selected team, one of the guys must be explosive expert. So you get selected in the urban blowing bridges, like that photo behind Chris. So there's always an expert explosives qualified. So that benefit I only realized afterwards. So in the beginning, everybody do basic demolition, just how to handle explosive, detonators, cortex, landmines, and simultaneously you learn a lot of the enemy's explosive. So if you encounter them in the bush, you know what it is. Okay, then there afterwards, then you do intermediate explosives, and then you do advanced explosives. That is in Kroonstad School of Engineers. And I remember that was quite an interesting exam. Your pass rate was 80%. And that's not a practical, that's the theory. And it's 6 hours, the actual theory. So yeah, so it was quite a long exam. Not even in varsity did I write that long exam. Okay, then you qualified in advanced explosive. Then on special forces side, we had unique courses like Clandestine Demolition. That was presented by Dr. Van Joint. So that was probably one of the most interesting courses I ever did. That's where he learned you how to improvise explosive, how to camouflage explosive, for instance, butter, explosive that looks like butter, how to use a bicycle as a landmine or as an improvised explosive device. And then you had another course that was EOD IED. EOD is ordnance explosive devices, which is your standard landmines and hand grenades like that. And then you have IED, is improvised explosive devices. That is devices normally like booby traps by enemy, or where they have parcels and the parcel is a bomb. And the purpose of that is to kill as many civilians as possible. That was the culture of the terrorists in South Africa. Indiscriminate, kill whoever walks past that specific parcel, normally activated by a time mechanism. And then not so much in our country, but more overseas. I remember the instructor was from England, and for the IED part, not the EOD part. And he told us overseas they would go for the operator, taking out the operator, so they may have the first device that go off, and then there's a secondary device, specifically a booby trap for the IED operator to take them out. Yeah, so it was because there wasn't a lot of guys qualified in IED, EODs. Not everybody feels like trying to dispose of parcel and you're not sure what is waiting for you. Clandestine explosive was Dr. Vanus joins course, and that once he trained us, the purpose was to go into Angola and train the UNITA Special Forces into how to use that specific mechanisms. And I remember they were quite successful. The butter trick actually worked beautiful. One or two of them were working in the mess where the Cubans actually were. So what they did is they had that explosive that looked like butter with a detonator and a booster inside and a time mechanism. And then when they come and that specific one they placed on the table before the Cubans were there. So they know the time schedule for the Cubans officers when they will come and sit around the table. And of course, the actual time was set within 5 or 10 minutes to give them sort of time just to get out of the place and before they actually could pick up that this is not real butter. So yeah, and we were informed afterwards it did go off, and it was quite a couple of the Cuban officers that was killed there. Yeah, so and then there was the other part is we had a company, EMLC. They were at Special Forces HQ. They manufactured devices and explosive for specific needs. We would tell them, okay, we need a landmine that you can't sweep with a mine detector. You can't prod it. Prod is you have a stick, wooden stick, and then you can feel a landmine. You can't open it. The moment you open it, it picks up the sunlight and then it activates the detonator. So that specific equipment was manufactured for us. I remember there was one limpet mine where they used PET in, if I remember correctly, the actual heat. Now, if something explodes, and you can see there's always a lot of flames, heat. Now, PET in, the heat was much higher than a normal TNT or P4 explosives. And that was specifically used for oil tanks, so that you know you're definitely going to create a fire if that thing go off. So these were the kind of equipment that was manufactured for us. In the beginning, we had just basically P4 and Cortex. Cortex looks like a piece of wool that you can connect quite a lot of charges that they can go off more or less at the same time. Now, the disadvantage of Cortex, if you use it in a bush, your terrain, like at the back there, is not always suitable to use Cortex. If you go, for instance, around a tree, the speed that it runs is over 1,000 meters per second. It will cut off. So wherever there's a bend in the Cortex, it cuts off. So that means all the explosives on that side is not going to explode. And then we start using something what we called nonel. It was just like a plastic tube with, it's not explosive inside, but it's just something that when you activate your time mechanism, it will send like a flame, and that nonel will carry it all the way to your detonator, booster, and then of course your explosives. And the benefit of that is that you can tie it around a tree, you can run it underwater, and that bridge behind is exactly where we used nonel. And I remember the feedback we got afterwards is that MPLR and the Cubans and the Russians were afraid to approach the bridge because they scanned it from a distance with their binos and they saw these Nanel pipes running all over. So they thought it's still booby-trapped. Yeah, so that gave us a little bit longer time to get away from the actual site. There were specialized explosives like a linear charge. A linear charge is where you want to breach a wall. So you would put that against the wall and it will knock the wall down for you. It's about 1.5 meters. And on that, you will add your safety fuse. Now, safety fuse, you strike and it burns and it gives you whatever length you use. That is how long time you have to get away. Then you will have what we call a knock-knock. It was a small explosive device with double-sided tape. Now, we used that in urban warfare. It's quite an interesting name. So you put it against a door that's locked and you pull your safety pin and then it takes about 4 seconds and it will open the door for you. So that we call a knock-knock. That's a vicious knock. Then we would have something like a beehive. That's one of the photos I sent to you. That was a shape charge. It looks like a beehive. And you can put that against, let's say, reinforced concrete. And it will blow a hole for you up to 2-3 meters. And then you can put your explosive inside. And of course, explosive follows the line of least resistance. So it's actually what we call tampered inside the bridge with the axle or the wall, because it's reinforced, so the effect of the explosive is much higher. I remember we had a low level bridge. It was lying just under the water level. And the problem for the guys that's fishing, they're forever driving into this bridge because it was lying just under the water. So I got hold of a American summarized formula of explosive. Now this was in the beginning of my period with explosive, and I did the calculations there, and they said, if you have tampering like water, you can lessen your amount of explosive by 60%. Basically because the water is a natural tampering, and in that specific not operation, exercise, it actually caused a water spout. So it blew up the span of and it literally picked it up into the air, very high up. So that was just interesting, small little things that you learn on the way with operations, a lot of exercises. So that's
I
basically.
ask you a few things about terminology, because we're going to use that, I'm quite sure. I mean, you already explained PETN, which I believe is just it's a type of explosives, and it's very, very warm.
Yeah.
It's very hot. I think perhaps you should tell us, because I know about that, because our sponsor wrote a book about it. Not that specifically, but he mentioned it. There was a raid called Kerslig, or candlelight. You were not on it, but you do know what happened there. And you also know that there was some kind of accusations from head office headquarters afterwards, regarding the use of explosives, and that something went wrong with those explosives.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder if you can tell us quickly about that, because we're not going to really deal with it. We might even deal with it at a later episode as well. But since we're talking explosives, can you just tell us quickly about?
Yeah, the actual limpet mine was shaped, oval shaped, and then for one other stupid reason, your tie mechanism was lead. Now, what oil that's not refined oil, it still needs to be refined. It's pumped into these tanks. It's hot. So that's what happened. That was one of the incidents that happened at Kerslig. So the time the thickness of the lead, if you pull the pin, it's like a staple, start cutting through the lead. Now, getaway time of 6 hours. But now what happened with the tanks that's warm, that dropped down to 20 minutes. So the guys were planting these landmines against the tanks, and they started to explode while the guys were still inside the tank farm. The other thing that happened is Cocky the cook, he had the limpet against the tank, and he pulled the safety pin, and the safety pin didn't want to go out. Now, they were a three-man team. It was him, Kloppies, and Piet van Zyl. And Cocky took the limpet and he put it between his legs, and then he pulled the pin. Now, unfortunately, what happened is that lead already dropped out. So there was no getaway time. It was an instant explosion. So he disintegrated completely. Kloppies was out of his clothes. Piet Fourie lost most of his sight. So they had 3 casualties there immediately. So that was nearly a disaster, but they got all 3 out of there. Sorry, 2. There was nothing left of Cocky. And then afterwards, we had a briefing. I'm not sure why I was also invited there. Probably most of the operators. And they discussed this, and there was a general there as well. And the feeling we got from the operator side is that if they want to blame the operators for the mishaps there, which wasn't. We did our part. And that was to get the limpets on the tanks and then get out of it. And you would normally bring your safety pin. If you pull it out, you have to put it in the pocket so that you can show everybody afterwards, okay, I had 4 landmines or limpets. I've got 4 safety pins. So it was out and out, not an operator's fault. It was out and out where the limpets came from. So yeah, now of course they had the ranks, so we were totally override. But luckily afterwards they would have a combination of lead and a time mechanism, so which were much more reliable. So you can set it on 6 hours, but you will have the lead one as backup as well. But the primary safety will be your time mechanism, which will work like on clocks, or like a clock on hours.
Okay, am I correct? Am I correct, SVA, if I say I'm trying to explain this in a layman's view? So if I ask a stupid question, please forgive me. But explosives by itself is not capable of really exploding. Something must happen to it.
Yeah.
And that something is the detonator, isn't it? There's like a little explosive inside the explosives.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, the detonator is thinner than my pinky, and it's about the size of that. You get one that you can put in a safety fuse, so it's open at the back, and then you have an electrical one with 2 wires. Now, if I remember correctly, the explosive in a detonator was also PETN, same as we had in the limpets. And now, even the detonator by itself is not always strong enough. So then you would have a booster, what I call the RDX wax booster. So the detonator would go inside the booster, and the booster would go into your charts, whichever one. And that was that incident at where we resupply Renama. I told about landmines that were on that pallet, that one pallet where the parachute cut away. So it hit the ground from about 1,000 foot, and it was flattened to half the size it originally was, and it didn't go off. So they need that vicious explosive, which you can only get from a detonator and a booster. Sometimes you have to have the booster as well. By hitting it by a hammer, it's not going to go off, except the detonator. The detonator is very, very sensitive. If you hit that with a hammer, it's definitely going to explode.
Oh, yeah,
But the landmine itself.
I remember you saying something about a black operator at their place somewhere in Wambuland, where the detonator went off because of a radar signal or something
Yes,
like that.
yes, yeah, that was in 5 reconnaissance. That was the operational base in Ondongwa. There's a lot of radar in that area because that was also the Air Force HQ, operational HQ. From there, they dispatched Impalas, Mirages, C-130s, and so forth. So one of our guys were working with the electrical wire, electrical detonator. And I think that electrical detonator had a booster and a small charge already connected to it. And with the wires being opened, he didn't close it, cross it at the back. With the wires open, they picked up the radar signal that was sent out, and it exploded and it killed him instantly. Yeah, so it is explosive. The only benefit of working with explosive, you wouldn't know you did. You're not going to get maimed. 99%, you will be killed.
Okay,
because
so you've got to be careful. You've got to be switched on and have respect, I suppose, and not be distracted at all when you're working.
Yeah, and that's why we also in the army we paid special allowances for explosive, and then you had a special allowance for IED, EUD operator. I think I did show that badge that you get.
Yes, you showed it to us, but I'll put it on here as well. That's for bomb disposal. So that's where you actually didn't manufacture the explosives yourself. You called to probably the police or a member of the public, and you find a suspicious parcel there, and now you have to disarm it.
Okay, with what was interesting when I finished my career, I joined the University of Victoria, and even during that period, I was allocated to the IED EOD school because they didn't have enough operators to run it on the actual bomb threats and so forth. So I was driving this minibus, small minibus. Of course, there was no windows. You didn't know what was inside. Luckily, the crime wasn't that high then yet, because that's normally the first vehicle that they will steal is a minibus. So in there would be all the equipment that you need to disrupt a parcel, a bomb, or whatever. Yeah, so even while I was at varsity, I still had an income from the army side, yeah. It was nice, and I had transport.
Oh, that's nice. But then, of course, those days they had no cell phones.
Yeah, I had a small beeper. So if they need me to react, they would send me beep me on the beeper. And I think it only happened once during, I think it was biokinetist, that specific period subject. So I had to leave there quite in a hurry. Yeah, so that is IED, EOD. And for interest's sake, that was the second highest allowance in South African Army. I think the highest were being a test pilot. At that stage, Cheetah was the plane that was tested by our pilots. It was built by the South African industry. Yeah, as far as disrupting a parcel, you would have two ways of doing it. Like grabbing it with pulling it apart. So the disadvantage of that is, let's say for instance, it's in front of a car. You first have to take the window out. And now that by itself can set off the parcel inside. And then what we do, you would have a small pulley that you put outside the vehicle, let's say against a pole. And then you would put grappling hooks around this parcel. And then you would maneuver it. And that took a lot of exercise and training, is to maneuver a parcel like that out of a vehicle with two ropes that you're busy pulling, running on pulleys. Sometimes you would have two pulleys and pull it out of the truck and then pull it towards you. And of course, you're at a safe distance, and you would have these helmet, heavy helmet with thick glass and an armored suit. So you would take a knock, but not directly in front of you, but you can take a knock 20, 30 meters away from there. And then you would put the parcel outside, and then you will send your small, let's call it a tractor. That was an ID vehicle, miniature bulldozer. And on that bulldozer, you will have a charge that's full with water, 20 cc's, maybe 30 cc's, I can't remember. And then at the back, it was a steel pipe. And the back of the steel pipe will be like, what do you call it? But you get in a normal round. Afrikaans, we call it buskruit. Powder. Gunpowder, yeah. So, similar to that, yes. And it's interesting on the force of that water spout. It will disrupt the parcel completely. So we didn't want to use explosive because you would then just enhance the actual explosive that's inside if you put your explosive on top of it. So the water works excellent. It would disrupt a parcel completely. Detonator, mechanism, everything.
Yeah, so once you've done that and the police get hold of that parcel, you can do all sorts of forensic tests on it.
Yes, yes, and then they can
and DNA and the way it was made, they give away.
Yeah, and then also can even trace where the mechanisms is coming from. They can even see if it was stolen out of an army base. But in my days in the army, there's no way you can easily steal anything out of an army base. I know later on some of the explosives were civilian explosives because that was easier to get hold of, civilian explosives. But very, very something.
I mean, SW, you can get hold of, say, TNT and you just wrap nails around it.
Yes.
It will still kill civilians. It might not take out an armored vehicle, but if for a terrorist, he doesn't care, you know, the more he can maim, the better for him. Yeah,
I remember we did a lot of improvisation ourselves when we attacked Kuvalai. Kuvalai was just over the border from Rundu on the Angolan side. We attacked it one morning very, very early. We had a plastic container where you get your smoke grenade in. So we took that out and we put PE4 in it, put a safety fuse in it with a booster, a small safety fuse for about 5-10 seconds. When you would strike it, and then we would throw it into the room. Now, yeah, that's the guys that came out, they were like zombies. They walk out, you can just turn them like this, and they walk that way.
Yeah, so the short ways of explosive devices is, I mean, if you ever have cleared the room, you know, in counter-terrorism operations, and you throw in those stun grenades, you know, they go off twice. It can really disrupt you in the flashbangs. Yeah, they really flipping. I've seen some people started throwing up because they're totally disorientated by it. But I also want to know something. We'll talk about the Kuvalai raid, I think, in a future episode. At one stage in the future now, we're going to talk where you people were sabotaging or blowing up trains and railway lines. And you use something called slurry explosives.
Yes.
Now, that is not the same as a fixed C4 or PE4 plastic explosives. It's not the same type of thing. This thing is liquid. Am I correct?
Yeah, that was very, very unique. They manufactured it for us, MLC. Slurry itself is a liquid explosive. So the benefit of that is that you, of course, first you make a hole, and then you pour the slurry in, and then it will go deeper into the ground, but a better part will stay. And then you would have, we had two unique devices. One was called pick, and the other one was called shovel. But I will give more detail about them. Is that you would put them like on top of the slurry. The slurry actually became hot after an hour, I think. And pick worked like that. It was specifically for locomotives, because what they did, they would put a railway truck in front of the locomotive to detonate at any landmines. So we didn't have any pressure devices in. We had it in the middle of the railway tracks, so it would pick up the magnetic field from the engine of a locomotive and charge it, and that was enough to put off the detonator. Then we had 2 more or 3 more techniques. You couldn't sweep it with the mine detector. It would pick up that frequency of the mine detector or the magnetic field, also then boost it, and it will ignite the landmine. Then it had like what is quick? The liquid lead.
That thing you get into thermostats, thermometers.
That's it.
You press on
That's
it, and it shows you. I'll find the word in English.
Yeah, no, it was like 2 plastic tubes, very small. So if you planned the landmine and it was off-center, slanted to the one side, when the mine actually activates itself, it will read the angle it's against, and it will accept that as neutral. So the moment you come and you have something that you stand from a distance and you start pulling it up, it will detonate. So there was no way that you could move it. And then the third one is that if you open it, it will pick up the sunlight and detonate it as well. Yeah. So there was, once it's planted, there was no way you could actually render it safe again.
Yeah, you can't dig it out. I mean, how do you dig out something which goes into every hook and
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you, that's clever. But what do you carry it in? Like in a bottle, or do you pour it out like coffee? I'm quite fascinated.
The slurry we carried in 5 kilogram bags. There's normal sandbags that you use to reinforce a place. That we used it, and then we had another explosive, which was also, that was manufactured by Dr. Van Joint. No, it wasn't explosive. It was a way to attach your explosive. We always had a problem, and we used it at that bridge, is how you can't use a Hilti gun or anything that makes too much noise. You need something to fasten in against the pillar of the bridge. So he came up with a mixture. It was 2 bottles that you, and we had a plank with 2 hooks on, and then you would shake these 2 bottles, pour it, mix it onto the plank, and I would say 1 minute, 2 minutes, even before that, within the moment you mix it, you would put it against the pillar, and within 2 minutes you can hang onto that hooks. It likes a chemical reaction. It burns into the cement, and then you can hook on your charts onto that. Now that was also manufactured by Dr. Van Joint.
I have a picture of you, which I will put here, where you're standing next to what looks like a dam. And
Yes.
It looks like there's a plank like this, a piece of wood in front of you. Would that have been where you use this type of mixture, this glue adhesive type of thing? But if not, it doesn't matter. You can just tell us about that dam anyway, because that was not an enemy dam. That's actually in South Africa.
No, that was, we blowed up a couple of things in KwaZulu-Natal. Civilian, that one was a dam wall. I can't remember why they wanted to blow up that dam wall. And if you can look, it was very primitive the way we did it. We didn't have any shape charges or charges manufactured to take out a dam wall. So, but that was a way of picking up experience, what will work, that was just basic PE4. Now the problem there is that explosive follows the line of least resistance. So there was we didn't tamp it behind it. What you would do normally is you would put it against the wall and then you will fill a lot of sandbags, put it around your explosive device. That is the ideal way of doing it. Now, that was just playing around it.
So you would force the explosives to go one way. And because if it's going one way, it will be, of course, a lot more destructive.
Yes.
And I think what you refer to as PE4, plastics explosives 4, I think the Americans talk about C4.
Yeah.
Plastic explosives. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's from Noble or something. I know our sponsor wrote quite a bit about it.
Yeah, that P4 is like dough. It's very soft. You can form it in whichever way you want to. And then we also had sheet explosive. I must actually forward you that one. That is for more specific small targets. It comes out, it looks exactly like a sheet, but it's about 5 or 10 sheets thickness. And with that, we did a lot of playing around, fooling around. For instance, I took a steel plate, and you cut out your initials with the sheet explosive, and you detonate it, and you would have a nice souvenir with your initials burned into that plate.
Okay, so it worked a little bit like a shape chart. You can shape it in a certain way so it can write your name. I mean, you can even write the name of, let's say, Michelle, which I'm sure will bring a smile to your face, with a little heart or something next to it too. So you can actually play with explosives, and I don't mean, let me just say, we don't want you listening here to go and play with explosives at all. We don't say that you reach a certain stage where you're so good with it that you can really almost become like an artist.
Yeah, and then of course there's the other side is your ordnance explosive devices. That's your landmines, standard landmines, South Africans. A lot of it was Russians. We mostly used Russian landmines, TNT. TNT was just solid cast landmine. Then there were the pomzets. Pomzet would have, looks like a pineapple. And then on top, you would have a mechanism, and you will have a tripwire, very thin tripwire that you would put over a track, or especially if you escape and evade, you would leave that behind. And then there was something we very, very seldom used. I only can think of once we used it, and that was anti-personnel mines, anti-personnel landmines, or mines. Is small, like a cupcake, a little bit bigger than a cupcake. You would plant it in a track, and whoever stands on it, you will lose your leg, sometimes your life. But it's very indiscriminate. So we only used that once, operation that I remember. I must make a note of that operation. Yeah, we can talk about it. And then there was the plowshare. The plowshare the Rhodesians use in their minefield, with about the size of a plate. With inside is the mechanism with the with your, what can I say, with your detonator. And then from there would be a tripwire across. But they had it like that, it's tension release. So if you walk behind it, which the Turs did, and you push it down with your leg, it explodes because it was tension release. Yes, that was basically your, and then of course you had your hand grenades, the M26. There was other few Russian hand grenades we also utilized, but and more than that, you seldom actually would encounter in the bush.
I can tell you a story about the M26. You know, when I was doing my bush warfare, the police counterinsurgency training, we were throwing hand grenades with M26. And it's really a process where there's no joking, there's no fooling around, for obvious reasons. And they got even worse, the instructors, when we started playing with white phosphorus grenades, which are something else. But anyway, so one or two of these grenades didn't go off. They were like dots. Because, in the police, we always had the oldest equipment possible. So now these things had to be destroyed. And I always thought they would just shoot them. Because it's not far away. It's about, as far as you can throw a hand grenade, is about, what, 50 yards, 40 yards at the most. And so nothing of that. This one guy was explosives expert, so he just walked to them with a little piece of explosives, and he would put it right on top of his grenade, which is lying there. After a while, because some of them were smoking too. But I mean, the grenade was smoking, which meant that we would take a smoke break somewhere else. And we would walk up to it, and then you just put this thing on it and just blow it electrically afterwards. So what do you think of that method?
And that's dangerous.
Very dangerous. Also too.
Because that detonator was just waiting for that last roll over, and then it would explode. It was then maybe the way it lie or something. Yeah, that's no.
Yeah, I thought myself, these guys got a lot of guts, but they were so nonchalant about it. They just walk all over and crawl to a thing or something.
Yeah, ironically, with urban, we would only use stun grenades, the flashbang. We didn't use normal grenades like M26 and so forth, because a lot of the time it's drywalling inside, so you can't use a grenade there. You're going to kill somebody next door, your own body. So it was stun grenades and tear gas. That was the only two grenades. And even in the bush, seldom that you could use grenades. The bush is too thick. You may just hit a twig or a branch and that grenade comes back. So very, very seldom I had to use that.
Yeah, I cannot remember in the police that we ever used grenades or rifle grenades. I mean, we had them, we were trained in them, but they were fairly useless. I mean, because unless you got the terrorist trapped inside the building, which now is solid brick.
Yeah.
But then usually they just drove with a Casper right on top of it, broke the walls down, and then would go in and do what's necessary.
Yeah.
But I need to ask you, Essia, when you excuse me of a cough, don't have COVID, nothing wrong with me. It's just talking too much, I suppose. But what do you feel when you have to work out the plans on how to blow a bridge like the one behind me, and we're going to talk about it? What do you look at? How do you work out how many tons of explosives do you need?
Yeah, normally, like that specific bridge, there was a reconnaissance done beforehand by a small team, 2 guys, and they would actually be very close to the bridge, take photos, and that photos will now be presented to a guy, I think his name was Piet Coetzee, and he can determine by looking at the pictures and taking on a scale, your pillars is this high and your pillars is this thick. You can see that pillars is massive. And then we would do the calculation based on that. And I think for that specific bridge, we carried about 600 kilograms of explosive. There was 2. There's another one higher up in the river with a more low-level bridge. But yeah, so between the 2 bridges, we had more than a ton of explosive that was carried by us. Yeah, so that was the smaller bridge was overkill, but ours, I think, was calculated correctly. And yeah, the unfortunate there's not something that you can tamper it with. You have to place it as high as possible where the span is lying on the pillar. So right in that corner. So at least there you have like a tamper, the span on top. So the explosive would go down and hit the ground and go up again, because that pillars weren't very high. Here in front, the guys standing here in front were Cubans and Russians. And we got the pictures from them. How ironically. Long afterwards, I became friends with those stain, and they gave him this picture. So it was nice to see afterwards the effect of the actual explosives. There we didn't use, I can't remember. We had charges, 5 kilogram charges pre-prepared. So it was basically in small bags. We just had to hook them up.
We're going to talk about the Gerald Bridge in the next episode, one of the next ones anyway. How many of you were there? And then we'll let it go. How many of the advanced explosive graduates were there in the army?
Sure, yeah. With us, I think there were only 2, in special forces, there were 2 IED operators, as far as I remember. Now I'm talking up till 88, from 77 till 88. In the army itself, ironically, there were quite a few Navy guys that have done the EUD, IED course, but now we had the benefit on the Special Forces side. It's probably we're in a fortunate position to be more exposed to various other kind of explosives that you won't find in the war, where the other units weren't that fortunate. Yeah, so we had, I think, the best knowledge as far as various explosives are. Yeah, and so, yeah, I can't actually give you a figure, but I know it's only a handful.
Can you end here and tell us something funny about explosives? If there was anything funny about it?
Yeah, when one operation where we used a linear charge, we named it Hulk. Actually, it was named Hulk by the guys that manufacture it. It's a linear charge about 1.2 meters long, and I would say about 10 centimeters wide. And then in the center of that charge is something like a broomstick that swivels. So you would put it against the wall, put the broomstick in, and then that one we strike the fuse, and then we ran around a corner. Simultaneously, some of the other team were firing 106 millimeters into the house. And so as I strike it and we went around a corner, this 106 went off, well, nearly right through the house. So yeah, we were happy our Hulk went off, and we charged around the corner, and here we saw that the last part of the safety fuse.
So you had to backtrack.
Yeah, well, first it was the domino effect for the guys.
Well, you're damn lucky somebody didn't shoot anybody, because you're willing to go through that hole and to figure it is on the trigger. There's an enemy on the other side, and now you stop.
Yeah, and yeah, of course, then it flattened the wall, and as we run in, the chickens came running out. So.
Yeah, that was beanbag. I actually have a question here. Somebody wrote to me in the Afrikaans one and asked me if you actually mean chickens, or is that slang for something else, or were it actual favorite chickens? Things which.
Yes. Yeah. That was chicken. So what we didn't know is, I think, it was a garage, and we put the linear charge just in front of the garage, or the back, and the back was actually where the chicken, what do you call it? The chickens were.
Chicken nest.
Yeah.
Good. Where chickens live.
Yeah. So yeah, fortunately, we didn't kill any chickens. I think they must have been behind the garage, sort of, but they decided to get out of here.
Very wisely so, I would say. Very wisely so. Okay, right. Isvia, can you tell us the myths, the nonsense which we see in Hollywood regarding explosives? Can you tell us a few things?
Let's start out with one which I see quite often in war movies. The terrorists attack a team and they would fire RPG, and then the whole building will disappear behind the sky, or a vehicle will disappear. Now, that one incident where I shot a gas truck or Scania truck with the RPG right in front, you could be actually standing right next to that truck when that RPG, it's just a slug that burns. It's not a massive explosive. There's no explosive in the slug. It was fired by a booster. Now, the booster will burn and that propels it and that gives it its speed. But the part in front is not explosive. It's like I said, with that truck, if you stand 2 or 3 meters next to it and you RPG go into the truck, that slug goes to the back. There's not a massive explosive like they show in the movies. And of course, later on, the Russians manufactured the shrapnel one. We were not that accurate, but it was like a grenade, something like that, which I never saw in the movies. It's more the shaped one. Auditors prefer to use that one. But yeah, it's a total overkill. And then a hand grenade also is not blowing 10 guys. A hand grenade can explode close to you. Most of the shrapnel goes up. There may be a shockwave if it's in a building, but then again, it's not that effective either. A stun grenade, yeah, a stun grenade which we use would be a flash to blind you. That is effective. And then a bang. Because it's in a confined space, it is effective. But if you throw it there in the open, not that effective either. Landmine, yes. Now we're talking about real explosive. And what the terrorists did, they would put 2 landmines on top of each other, TNT landmines. And our South African vehicles were the best in the world, infantry vehicles. They were manufactured V-shape, so the shock wave would be split away from the vehicle, and the actual body would come loose. So a lot of shock will be absorbed by that. And a lot of the infantry guys survived even a double cheese landmine. But of course, now not in a soft armor vehicle like a Ural or a Cas. Our Buffles and Caspers and Rattles were all they could
Improved.
Yeah, mineproof, yeah. But
yeah, we led the world on that. I mean, in fact, the entire US MRAP program is based upon the Casper. I mean, that's 1976 technology, which they didn't even know about until they discovered 50 years later.
But yeah, most of the scenes where in the movies where they use explosives and so on, it's totally overkill. No, I have to make it interesting, so otherwise nobody would enjoy that specific cut or scene.
Yeah, we always add a bit of gasoline and things in there as well, you know, to make these nice flames, and it's not realistic. Normally there's just one hell of a bang and there's like black smoke, and that's about it. I was surprised on how little damage a hand grenade really does when you're just lying there in the open. It's really not that effective, and they taught us to well, I will put it like this: by 1989. We were reasonably convinced in the police that we're going to walk into terrorists inside South Africa, and we did. And sometimes they would drop a hand grenade at us, or they would throw it at us, and so if you could shoot a guy, of course, you'll shoot him, but you still have to get away from that hand grenade. And so we learned, even myself, was not known as a fast runner. In fact, the way I run is designed to make people laugh. It's ungainly. It's so ungainly that I wouldn't do it in public. But you could run quite far. That 3 seconds that it takes to explode, or 2.8 seconds, you can get away from its killing range quite easily. You just need to get away. And then we had a certain way of falling down. We would fall down and we would keep our legs together, like your parachute jumps, and face our feet first towards the hand grenade, because we felt that our boots might protect us a little bit. And your feet are not that important. It's not as important as your head, you know, when it comes to wounds. Yes, the funny thing is, you had to put your arms right down your sides, not hold it over your head like you would think you would do. No, they would kick you in the ribs if you do that. So you had your arm straight down, so that your arms could protect your vitals also inside your chest area, where
Yes,
your
yes.
vital figures. It's interesting to me that many of the guys were not doing that. They would naturally grab, what part of the body can I describe here? One which a female don't have.
Yeah, yeah.
They would grab that and try and cover that part of their body against any harm.
Yeah, I was thinking of one option. We're going to talk about that, where they fired, it was SWAPO Special Forces, they fired a RPG on us. But they were close range. The booster of the RPG was still burning. And they hit the tree right above where two of our guys were lying. The guy's nickname was SWAPO, and the other guy was Duplessis. And that slug burned right through SWAPO's backpack, into his back. And when I opened, we took off his backpack and opened his shirt, that was his back now, it burned holes into his body. But there was no blood. The temperature was so high, it sealed. And then, of course, the actual back rucksack took most of this velocity of the slug. It took away. Yeah, so he was right. I mean, the RPG, the booster was still burning where it hit the tree. And they both survived.
Yes, we'll talk about that because I think one of them were quite upset with you. But perhaps you can tell us the story why he was upset with you.
We will talk about that one.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later because I can see the internet is backing up again. Yeah, I think we covered the basics of explosives now. I must tell you all listening here, we had quite a few problems with the internet. If I was a suspicious fellow, I would tell you someone was picking up the servers, the terminology we were using. And suddenly, suddenly people's ears are picking up, it's quite funny. But we're not that suspicious. We'll just say it's a normal internet problems we're used to. So when we go forward now in the next episode and we start talking about these raids, I'm sure that you will be able to follow some of the terminology a little bit better. If you have questions, like always, just leave them below or write to me, and we will do our best to answer you if it's possible to answer you. We're obviously not going to tell you how to make homemade bombs and things like that. SW really knows how to do it. He's not going to tell you. So don't ask me stupid questions.